Welcome back to the program. In studio, Quinton Klabon. He is with the Institute for Reforming Government. And I heard you speak at a previous school board meeting, and the way you detailed common sense remedies and solutions to so many abject failures of the district was very profound, very articulate. And then you follow me on Twitter, which of course I appreciate, and decided to have you on the show on your request, by the way, which I'm glad I accepted your request. So we got a school board meeting tonight. Can you give folks some details from your experience and your point of view of what can be done to get better outcomes with the current system we have and the resources in the current system?
Right. First of all, thanks for having me. You guys, there are like shows that pretend to talk about real things, and then there are people who actually get into it, and you're definitely the latter, so I appreciate your time. Yeah, so I worked at St. Marcus Lutheran School for 7 years, still mentor, volunteer for the alumni, high school, and college-age kids. So urban education is really critical to any kind of future for Wisconsin. I think what people, I just want to help feed some data to people to help articulate, to add to what they're articulating already on your show and in these school board meetings. So I think we know that things are bad, but not how bad. So let's just take Black students in Wisconsin. This is genuinely true. There are 3 states that have fixed reading enough: Florida, Massachusetts, and Mississippi, where the special needs kids in those states outscore the Black kids in Wisconsin. Not like kids in schools with a lot of special needs kids. Literally just the special needs kids are outscoring our Black kids. If you moved your family to Mississippi right now, they'd be like, oh my gosh, do you have a learning disability? Do we need to get you into this, a small classroom? That's how bad things have gotten in Wisconsin, and specifically Milwaukee. If you're thinking about think what your viewers' image, your listeners' image of Baltimore public schools is. Those kids are a year ahead of ours. Chicago, 2 years ahead of ours. Miami, 3 years ahead of ours. So we may have struggles here, but Baltimore has struggles, Chicago has struggles, and yet they've figured out something we haven't, and that's what I wanted to talk about today.
Maybe they get more funding, right? Because it's always about the money. Maybe those schools that have found a way to increase the reading scores, et cetera, that's because they get more money per student than here. Is that the case?
Yeah, that's what you would think, right? And so obviously if you get into Boston, if you get into Chicago, they are spending a little bit more. But my brother lives in Texas, and I know lots of St. Marcus kids have relatives in Mississippi. Those teachers are working 2 or 3 jobs. Those, their history books end in the 1980s. They're making things work there. Right now, Milwaukee is in the top of the 100 biggest districts in the country. Let's just take the top 100 biggest districts. We're 15th for spending. Before the referendum. So even before the referendum, we were doing really, really well in terms of spending, and yet those results aren't coming out in the classroom. And the question is why? And hopefully people show up at 5:30 tonight at Milwaukee Public Schools Central Services to ask why.
Do you have an answer as to why that is? Why we are 15th out of 100 major school districts and we have lackluster performance?
Yeah. So if you're 29 years old or younger, apologies, your school probably failed you when it came to teaching reading. So we switched things up in the year 2000. Long story short, you and I got the gray hairs poking through. We learned to read through phonics, so sounding out words, hooked on phonics, all that stuff, right? So if I don't know what the word truth is, I can pronounce T-R-U-Th, and I can sound out what the word truth means, right? Right now, for Milwaukee Public Schools and schools across the state, not just MPS, we were taught basically to memorize words. So you memorize the word truth and you memorize the word insurance, which works for a little while. But once you're trying to memorize those fancy school words that you were talking about before, you just can't memorize all of the words. So very long story short, Mississippi in 2013, they said, we're freaking Mississippi. We have to fix it. Well, there's nowhere, we're at bottom. We just need to switch things up and see what we can do. They went back to phonics. They retrained all their teachers in phonics. They changed how the colleges teach their teachers, and then they gave parents support to reinforce that at home. In 6 years, they went from the bottom to top 5, and then in another couple of years, they're now top 3. They fixed it in a decade.
Help explain this to me, because if we know that kind of change and amendments and changing the pedagogy works, then why are we so resistant to doing something like that here?
Well, as you know, speaking as a former and current middle class white person, if it doesn't affect the middle class white people in Wisconsin, things don't change. And unfortunately, it did. Our white students are very mediocre nationally. Like, we get our butts kicked by Massachusetts, we get our butts kicked by a bunch of other states. But there was no movement on that. And then finally, last year, we passed a law to try and change things. So what I want people to do, if they're listening, not driving, look up the science of reading. The science of reading. That's the kind of thing that we're now going to do in Wisconsin starting September. It's late, but it's not too late. But what I would encourage people to do, whether in charter schools, voucher schools, or MPS, go to your teacher and say, hey, what's the science of reading? Is my child learning that? And if they give you either a 5-second answer or a 5-minute answer, they probably don't know what they're talking about, and you should switch your kid's school as soon as possible. If they give you a nice, concise answer, phonics, helping kids break down words, then they really know what they're talking about, and you can trust them. So look up the science of reading.
Interesting that you said if it does not impact middle-class white folks, then there's probably not going to be any movement. But at the same time, white children are not performing as well academically as some of these other states as well. So what is Wisconsin getting so fundamentally wrong about how we educate our young people, especially if we know what blueprints exist in other places, that it's helping aid in their students' achievement, and we're just not doing it here, even though we're asking the public for more money, property taxes are going up, referenda are passing left and right. You would think that the investments would be in the things that have proven successful in other places.
Well said. So 2 things. 1, nostalgia. Wisconsin in the 1990s, our schools were incredible. Like, we were smoking people, top 5. And so people who grew up then, they just think things are the same way forever. They don't think that other states can improve. We are in control of our destiny. Meanwhile, we were flat for 20 years and other states passed us by. So it's that complacency of being a front runner, and now we're behind. Secondly, I think it's the idea of that of people kind of being set in their ways. So if you were taught something in college, you have pride about how you were taught in college. You're proud that you went to UWSP or UW Milwaukee or UW Madison, and you're really proud of what you learned. And if someone comes in, if I come in and tell you you might need to switch things up, you're not going to take to that. And so sadly, we see generation after generation get wasted away, and all of a sudden we're at the bottom when it comes to Black performance nationally. And I think maybe a last thing that we maybe want to talk about is just not having enough teachers. So in MPS, 25% of the kids are Black boys, right? Blacks, unfortunately, we have the highest incarceration rate in the country for Black young men. And it's really unfortunate. 5% of the teachers in MPS are Black men. And most of those are middle school. Most of those are high school. Most of those are electives. You're not getting a Black male teacher in 2nd grade, right? It just doesn't happen. And so there's this program, speaking to middle-class white people, there's this program that Governor Evers just put out called teacher apprenticeships. Basically, you're going to get free college, fully paid for, and you're going to get hands-on experience for your junior and senior year. You're basically going to be a junior teacher for your junior and senior year and get paid for it while you're going to college. Imagine that. So the problem is, it's offered in Appleton, it's offered in Green Bay, it's offered in Wausau. Guess where it's not offered? Milwaukee. MATC is not offering this program, and they didn't really care. So a second thing people can do today, call up MATC, call up the mayor, call up the governor, email, whatever you want, be nice, but say, hey, I want you to offer teacher apprenticeships. Do whatever you have to do to offer this free degree so that we can get teachers in MPS.
That sounds intentional. Why would it not be offered where the greatest need is? And on previous programs, I've talked about how the impact of having a Black male teacher at some point during a child's academic career dramatically increases their likelihood of graduation. They don't have to have Black male teachers their entire school career, but just having one at some point dramatically increases their likelihood of graduation. And you have this fantastic teacher apprenticeship program, and it's not being offered where we know that the impact could be most profound.
Yeah, imagine your 10-year-old boy, Black boy. You were taught to read incorrectly, and you haven't seen a Black male teacher your entire school career. Why would you ever care about school? Why would you ever think that you could be successful if you're not seeing it directly around you, right? Speaking of intentionality, yeah, I don't think these programs pass if they didn't affect, if they said, hey, we're going to take care of Milwaukee but not take care of Green Bay. I don't think these programs get through. But whenever Milwaukee gets excluded for some reason, it's okay, right? And I've emailed MATC. We've had MPS. We work together with all schools. We've had private schools email MATC. They haven't responded. So I don't know if they don't think it's important or if they're working on it and don't want to say anything. But yeah, call up MATC today and say, hey, offer the FOTE, F-O-T-E degree, offer teacher apprenticeships. And your child, if they're a junior or senior, they could be getting a free bachelor's degree and starting in teaching in like 3 or 4 years. So I hope you do.
Speaking with Quinton Klabon, he's a senior research director for the Institute for Reforming Government. I have family members that are all over the country, and some of them have school-age children, and a lot of those family members are in the South. And so when parents have open enrollment, which is done differently in different jurisdictions and in different states, the information of the schools that are available, some are private, some are charter, some are public. A lot of times, parents don't even know, but they can read these descriptions of the school, what the curriculum is like, what the core academic focus is, et cetera, et cetera. Some of it is, sports teams are, a draw for some of these students. The resistance that we have to offering alternatives to traditional public schools, especially if it's a charter school where the teachers don't have to be a member of the U word, the union, like they politically rail against it. They turn the public against these other forms of education, but we can look at other parts of the country where there are diverse offerings of how young people and how children get educated. Sometimes those children do well. And I know it's political and I know all the history behind it, but what would you say about MPS's consistent resistance to voucher schools, which actually is a slur, but also even charter schools? Like they were threatening to kick Carmen out of Pulaski, and Carmen is actually a higher performing charter school. Your thoughts on that?
You said it. Yeah, I think the fundamental problem with the Milwaukee Public Schools board, and honestly, even some of the choice schools around the city, are they want to focus on doing the hard stuff instead of getting the simple stuff, the basics right. So like the reason Jason Tatum is never going to be a better player than Giannis Antetokounmpo is because he's doing, double hezzy shots, praying they go in the playoffs. Giannis is just going to the rim and just flipping the ball in. That is why he will always be more effective. And so instead of focusing on getting reading right, recruiting teachers with this free program, getting classroom management and like just kind of security just like in place so that kids feel safe to come to school and don't skip out. Instead of doing that, they're like, well, we need all parents to be really good parents because if you don't have good parents at home, you can't learn. Or like we need 1 million mental health professionals. I'm not saying any of that stuff is bad. That would be great. We should have it. You've talked about 53206 getting people the trauma care cut, but we're not getting the basics, the very important, basic, simple stuff right. And Mississippi, Florida, all these states prove that you can do it. And so they cast blame on others instead of getting the simple stuff right. And frankly, I would love to see the competition. I would love to see MPS rising up the national rankings. But until they fix the little stuff, it's never going to happen.
What role do you think that private schools, especially those that have limited enrollment for parental choice students, and schools that have really, really high tuition. Like I see high tuition in private schools because I know a lot of public educators, they send their kids to Thomas More. They send their kids to Pius. Even some of our Democratic elected officials are very proud of the private school education that they got. Mandela Barnes is one, Chris Larson is another. But when it comes to allowing legislation that expands the number of children that can go to those same schools that our elected leaders went to, they are completely against it. So I've always looked at tuition as a barrier between poor black families and well-to-do middle-class black families, and also because I always take a cue from where educators send their kids because they know this stuff intuitively. And if they send their kids to private schools, but at the same time with union backing, they resist the expansion of more lower-income families sending their kids to private schools, isn't that still a bastion of segregation?
Yeah, and it has this cycle. So you may recall, I think you talked about it on your show, the people who voted for the referendum, basically they live on the borders of the Milwaukee district. So it was mostly white, or a large majority were white people, and they lived on the edge. They basically live in Quasi-Wauwatosa or right on the lake, right? And there are the Montessori schools there and the language immersion schools there, the Milwaukee Public Schools that are like lower income or that have fewer low income kids than my Central Wisconsin school that I went to. Even though we're in Milwaukee, they're majority white, which is insane. You talk about the schools in the suburbs that people send their kids to. When you have the income level limits as low as they are, and you have poverty in Milwaukee like it is, you're creating segregation. You're not allowing middle class families, whether they're black, white, Hispanic, Asian, indigenous, whatever, to come to these schools. You're saying this is a school for poor kids and this is a school for middle class or upper class kids. And the cycle continues. And of course, where do the teachers want to go? They want to go to the more stable schools with less turnover and less stress. And so they're getting much higher education than the kids in the low income schools. And then we wake up 10 years later and we're like, wow, my kid didn't learn anything for their entire school career and wonder why. So yeah, again, like we perpetuate these cycles. Other states have done different things and we just choose not to do so.
I've also found that people that live in some of the neighborhoods that you suggested, where the schools that they send their children to are good and they believe they are worth investing in, a lot of folks look at their property taxes when it's used to fund schools as almost like paying tuition. So a very good friend of mine moved his family out to Whitefish Bay. Property taxes are literally insane. Now, the house is of tremendous value as well. But he said we had to weigh paying tuition at a private school or paying higher property taxes in Whitefish Bay, which gives our kids a very, very high quality education. And they were willing to make that sacrifice. I think that similar phenomenon is happening in Milwaukee. Like, oh, sure, I'll pay more higher property taxes because that's like me paying tuition to send my kid to a high performing private school. So it's very, very unequal to say the least.
Yeah, and then with if folks want to use vouchers or go use a free charter school to do so, for some reason they're prohibited. People want to prohibit them from doing that. I think a really unfortunate thing is that you see it even with just open enrollment. So kids can go to Brown Deer. I don't know if people know this. Not this year. It switched back, but in 2023, Brown Deer public schools were less white than Milwaukee public schools. That's how many people are moving to the suburbs and exurbs and all that stuff. Again, just making those same choices. And I think a problem for getting Milwaukee to 1 million people or to making place, like when I work still mentoring at St. Marcus, kids tell me that like, I think people think that like the white people in Milwaukee are like, stop running down Milwaukee, stop saying bad things about Milwaukee, people in Wisconsin or people outside of Wisconsin. The people I know who talk the most trash about Milwaukee are the North Side Milwaukeeans. They're like, yeah, I'm leaving. I'm going to Atlanta. I'm going to Houston, and I'm not coming back. Thank you. Because we've offered nothing for them. You made a joke yesterday about like telling people to go into the trades, like, hey, hammer some roofs and everything will be fine. There are no basic jobs anymore, not in 2024 in America. You need to be able to measure. You need to be able to read correctly to do all of these things. Like if you want to be in the middle class, there are no jobs that just require basic skills anymore. And so until we invest here at home, until we stop forcing people or stop encouraging people to take higher taxes for their school choice or to even just use school choice in the city, we need to fix the basic stuff at home. That means reading. That means teachers. That means getting classrooms and hallways under control. That means making sure we don't have the worst attendance in the state, that kids actually go to class, especially in high school. And again, we can spend as much as we want. There's a budget meeting tonight where people will talk about all the wonderful investments that are happening for your child if you go to certain range of schools is what they really mean. And so, until we fix that, nothing's going to change.
Quinton Klabon, Senior Research Director at the Institute for Reforming Government. What time is the school board meeting tonight?
So there's one at 5:30 that I hope people come to, which is talking about Director Aisha Carr, and it's talking about school closures, consolidations, mostly on the north side, probably. The budget meeting that you can speak at, testify at, say whatever you want for 2 minutes, that's probably around 6 o'clock.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here. This is very enlightening and very informational. And, look at the crowd. It's insane. Thank you, sir. Have a great day, and I'll probably see you tonight.
Yeah, best audience in the city. Keep it going.
Oh, best audience in the city. Famous last words. The Truth with Sherwin Hughes will be right back.
Sherwin Hughes returns after this on 1017 The Truth, The Truth app, and 1017thetruth.com.
The Milwaukee County Office of Equity invites you to be